Hello and welcome to another episode of the Trash Talk Podcast. I'm the dev Sergej. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fine myself. And today we're gonna talk about something that we haven't talked about in a while, arguably maybe, and that is philosophy. More specifically, we're gonna talk morality. That's a subfield of philosophy. And we're gonna talk about the morality of short versus long-term good.
Yes. Basically, the question, do we sacrifice everyone right now to save much more people in the future?
Did you just say sacrifice everyone right now? Because that seems like it wouldn't lead to that. I don't think that math checks out, but but yeah, no, I mean, it's...
I'm sure we can find, the optimal percentage, right?
Yeah, but I mean, there's, these ideas like long-termism, there is questions about, ethics of, scientific experimentation and stuff like that, so there are definitely a lot of areas where this comes up, and when people talk about the greater good, right, sometimes that is more like a long-term thing. And the question is, right, how much consideration should we give to future good versus present good? And that is the question. Sergej?
I am kind of leaning towards the idea that, future good is, almost guaranteed to be, infinitely more... Yeah, just infinitely bigger. Since it lasts for however long humanity is alive, right?
I mean, I feel like it depends on the kind of future good that you're talking about, right?
Obviously, right.
I can see where it's coming from, but because a lot of
things... I'm talking in the sense of I don't know, medical procedures that get developed that can cure disease.
Yeah, that
will help infinitely many people once they actually get developed and used.
Well, yeah, so I guess that is sort of the main thrust of that I can think of, where there's a concrete example, unethical scientific experimentation is probably the core example of what actually has happened and does happen that actually falls under this, and the future good obviously is very strong compared to the short-term bad that is happening there. I do think there has to be said to some degree that we have to probably depreciate some value from the future good compared to the present-day good in some sense, because there's a lot of factors, right, that go into this. One is that, for example, in terms of saving lives, no one ever talks about inflation when it comes to human lives, but there is total inflation when it comes to human lives, right? There are just more people now. And arguably, that means a human life today is worth less than a human life 1,000 years ago.
That is true, yes.
It's a little bit complicated because obviously human life does arguably have some sort of intrinsic value that you have to put into a moral system, and that maybe doesn't change. But in terms of from a broader perspective, looking at humanity, obviously one human is a much smaller part of humanity than they used to be. So
also, if I can bring up another counterpoint to what I said, it's not really that the value is infinitely bigger in the future, because it will save infinitely many lives, for example. It will only really save the amount of lives between right now if we sacrifice whatever is needed to develop this technique till when it naturally gets discovered.
Or becomes obviated by something else, right? If...
Yeah.
It's a thing where it's great to be able to cure something, but if we can't prevent it in the first place, it doesn't, then whatever cure we develop is irrelevant. For the most part, prevention is hardly ever 100% successful, but there's also another factor that I think diminishes the future good in some sense, which is just probability, right? Because it's very hard to say that you will definitively succeed with whatever good you're aiming to do. And if you don't succeed, then obviously all of it is for naught. And in part, we could obviously say, like, for example, with the experimentation, right? If the experimentation doesn't lead anywhere, then obviously there is no future good coming out of that. Although, with science, it's hardly ever like this black and white. If it's well documented, then even a failure can be useful. Obviously, it's scientific progress, and that's very hard to quantify. Also, that whole, like, when we would have discovered it anyways, is also very hard to quantify, because it's almost impossible to say, we would have had this technology by now, even without the way we got it. It's like, how can you ever definitively say that? There are also scenarios where it's not infinite good, right? When you have ideas like, what if instead of donating money to a good cause today, I, like invest it cleverly and multiply it and then invest it later. Or donate it later, right? And it's like, there's always a finite sum, but in this case, it literally accrues interest.
Yeah, I mean, the money has to go from, like, it does, you don't just materialize money from nowhere. It still has to come from somewhere.
That is true.
They're still taking money from someone.
Well, yeah, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I mean, not necessarily, but you cannot really be sure if that is actually giving, if the result is still like a net positive.
Yeah, money's always complicated. Because, I mean, I guess any resource is in some sense complicated because of our interconnected systems, and you never really know what kind of harms, like, anything might cause. It's a whole thing about, I don't know if you've seen The Good Place, where there's this idea that, there's like a point system of, like, good deeds and bad deeds, and, like, how you get to heaven, basically, if you have enough good points. And it turns out that, like, as time marched on, it became more and more difficult to get to the good place, because every good thing you do actually has so many negative side consequences that this purely mathematical system just doesn't properly account for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess our takeaway here is it's a bit of a complicated question, but I suppose then if you say that unethical scientific experimentation can produce near infinite good in the future, does that mean it's worth it?
It can be. And therefore, I would argue that it isn't necessarily always unethical.
So you are disagreeing with established standards of medical ethics?
Maybe. I don't know. I have no clue what the current standards are.
I mean, I don't specifically know, but they're definitely fairly risky.
Like, I'm not advocating for, like, forcing volunteers. But I do want there to be a system for, like, actual volunteers where, like, it actually gets checked that the people applying for that are really volunteers and not forced into this position through, like, I don't know, monetary situations or other factors in their life.
That's always a problem, right? Because you can't really pay volunteers lest you just attract a bunch of financially vulnerable people that do it for the money.
Exactly.
And honestly, that's another way in which money is always sketchy, by the way, where, like, if anything is done for money, there's always this ethical question, right? Like, it's the whole point about, like, legalizing prostitution, where it's like, oh yeah, but that might lead to financially vulnerable women going into prostitution to make some money because it seems like the only way they can get it. And it's like, yeah, but, like, that's basically every, like, shitty job or exploitative situation, right? But it's like, if you're in a bad spot, you'll do more, like, things you wouldn't otherwise do for the money, right? So, like, it's always a question of, like, where do we draw the line?
Yes.
It seems like you're thinking about something.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that part before.
I think I've brought it up before, although I'm not entirely sure if you were on that episode. But, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
prostitution is also like a very complicated ethical issue, but not necessarily the question of today. I mean, that one mostly has short-term good and evil and not a lot of long-term.
Because like right now I'm starting to question, like, should we really not pay for the sacrifice the people are providing?
Like, realistically, obviously it makes sense, right? Like, to pay your volunteers, but if you pay them, then that has a course of nature to it. And then the question is, right, I guess it's the question I asked before, right? Like, does that mean that paying volunteers is unethical because it might lead people that wouldn't otherwise do it to do it for the money? And if they're willing to do it for the money, does that not in and of itself make it acceptable again?
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like they think they're getting a fair deal.
Ah, man.
See, all of this would be a lot easier if we had some sort of like universal basic income system where everyone like automatically has enough to live off of. Or like if you had like government provided housing and food or whatever, like whatever, like you have your constructed system, if you could live without any monetary pressure, then automatically, like anything like where you wouldn't do it but you are in a dicey situation, all of a sudden doesn't exist anymore because it's very hard to get into a dicey situation like that in the first place. But that's not the world we live in, and that's not really the topic.
Yeah. So, I guess like another criteria would be that like you kind of have to prove that the results of those tests, of those medical tests, would actually like help in some quantifiable way. Like whether it be positive, like confirming some theory, or like giving some counter evidence to the theory.
I mean, I suppose to some degree that is kind of what like testing for medication is already.
I mean, yes,
right.
Yes, I'm not saying it's not like this right now. Just like that, this is a requirement for me to think that hey, this could be worth it.
I guess there's another interesting point where a lot of the unethical experimentation is not necessarily something that I mean, as kind of alluded to, right? It mostly just accelerates the development because oftentimes scientists feel like, or those scientists in question feel like their work doesn't go fast enough if they do like the whole thing where they go through animal testing and then like they eventually get like permission to do early stage human testing and blah blah blah, right? And it's a whole process and there are rules at every step. And do a thing where like, oh yeah, you test it on a tissue sample, you test it on a mouse, you test it on a monkey, then you test it on a human, and like then you test it on a larger group of humans before it actually like is shown that like your results were outliers. And like it's also the thing where with medical testing, for example, when you're testing actual medicine, like if you do a test on 10 people and it's shown to be safe, that doesn't necessarily mean it's safe for everyone, because obviously you have to like have a representative sample of the population to actually like see that there wouldn't be some interactions that would be unforeseen, right? Because not all humans are the same, and just like from like a genetic disposition standpoint, like environmental factors from exposed in the past, like there are so many things that can affect how you react to certain substances. Okay, so you said that sometimes things that might seem unethical in the present can be justified if they have positive long-term outcomes, but you also wanted to find volunteers, which arguably is where the catch-off times would be, right? Where like if it's too dangerous, then it would be hard to find volunteers. But technically, having non-voluntary participants could still be worthwhile. An idea that has always somewhat fascinated me. Although, okay, this one gets a bit tricky because I've always thought the idea was intriguing you see it oftentimes in movies where they do experimentation on death row inmates, where it's like, oh yeah, if we're gonna kill them anyways, we might as well get some use out of them.
Yeah.
And I can see the appeal, but it also gets a death sentence. So, like, again, right, in like a perfect world, like, there would be no death row inmates to experiment on in the first place. So, and obviously there's the whole thing about like how there's technically cruel and unusual punishment if you like make them unnecessarily suffer on top of like their jail sentence and subsequent execution. But you know, it's definitely a thought where it's like, oh yeah, if you know, these people might as well provide some value to society. There's also, I mean, very coercive, right? Like in terms of like paying volunteers. There's also, for example, the option to like offer prisoners the chance to participate in medical experimentation to shorten their sentences. Right? Again, right? Like the ethics of that becomes a bit dicey because, I mean, okay, it becomes dicey on two ends actually in some ways because, I mean, maybe even more. But like the main ones are, first of all, obviously it's a deal that is very hard to say no to, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, you can like get your freedom like 5 years earlier or something if you participate in this. It's like, yeah, whatever, I do it. And at the same time, there is also the problem of like assuming that sentencing is fair, then there's probably a reason of why that time frame was determined for their incarceration. So then the question is like, can their rehabilitation be achieved with less time to go? And inversely, the impact on the broader system could be that, hey, actually, this prison volunteer system is actually doing wonders for medical research. And now, all of a sudden, you get something like the American justice system, justice in quotation marks, the American legal system, where you already got like really long sentences because it's just very convenient to have a lot of people in jail. Now, in their case, it's because there are companies that like actually like make profit per prisoner that is actually in their prison, because there are private companies running prisons in the US. Not all prisons, but some.
Yeah,
they have contracts.
Seems sketchy.
They literally have contracts where they have minimum occupancy numbers. Now, granted, that's not quite as bad as it sounds in that there's a minimum, like a minimum of beds that the government will have to pay for even if they're not filled, but that also still incentivizes them to actually be filled. And so part of the reason of why prison sentences are so bad in the US is that, but there's also a lot of other factors. Some of which are like attitudinal, where a lot of Americans see the prison system as more of a punishment and oftentimes look very negatively at criminals because of that, and so they oftentimes want to maximize the punishment. And again, right, like but there's also like just that there's a lot of money to be extracted out of prisoners in a multitude of ways, and so that also incentivizes. But again, right, like if we add that to it, obviously then it's just incentivizes it even more, where it's like, oh yeah, we need more volunteers, like raise the prison sentences. It's like,
yeah, that seems rather sketchy. I don't know.
It's a thing, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's the Suicide Squad solution, right? Where it's questionable, but you can kind of see the logic.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I conceived of this topic, I didn't think that this was just going to be me coming up with like very unethical ways of maybe like doing things that do have like long-term good impacts. That was not necessarily the conceit of the topic.
Yeah. One question that like I came up with when I initially wrote notes for this, that like I really don't have an answer for, is like, what if, like, if you do actually sacrifice someone, either like on a volunteer basis or not, but they would have actually made a major discovery later on in their life if they did not sacrifice themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a bad argument. Because it
Yes.
first of all, it's one of those that like we can literally never know what any one given person would have done, and you can kind of on the counter argue like, what if that person would have been the next Hitler, right? Like it's that whole thing where like obviously like someone could have done tremendous good for the world, but also tremendous bad, and it's impossible to foresee that. I mean, I say that I'm sure there are statistical modes of analysis that you could use to determine if someone is more likely to have a positive or negative impact on the world. But obviously, there's no way to know for certain. And
Of course.
I think it's a good way of looking at it. I would say that probably isn't a factor. It's a similar argument that you hear people make against abortion. Where it's like, oh, what if like the child, like what if the fetus would have grown up to be like an important scientist? It's like, right, like that feels like a weird argument to make because like anything could have incredible potential until you figure out if there actually is anything there. And so
I think with abortion it's like a different argument because usually, like from my understanding, like abortions happen because like the person does not have the resources to raise the child.
I mean, there are many reasons for why they happen. Medical necessity is also one, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, resources is oftentimes a factor, but also sometimes it's just that people don't want to have kids. Obviously, it's always that situation where, like, if someone is having an abortion...
I mean, I would still count that as a resource, like mental resources to, like...
Yeah, fair enough.
Spend the time and, like, your, like, thoughts on the kid, on raising the kid.
I mean, I guess the argument is, if someone's having an abortion that was not medically necessary, then probably they shouldn't have had kids at that point in their life, hence why they're having an abortion, right? Mm-hmm. So I can see that argument where it's like, oh yeah, someone is not likely to grow up to be as influential if they are not in an environment where they are being fostered optimally. Although that doesn't necessarily have to be the case because sometimes people from worse off backgrounds do still end up contributing, but I still think that like that the idea of like this theoretical potential is still not a great line of argumentation because you are basically just saying, oh, what if, and the what if thing is not like even that likely. Like, for any one person, the chance that they will end up like having like a world-changing impact or like a strong positive impact on the world.
To be fair, it doesn't really need to be like world-changing, right?
Yeah, fair enough. But like
normal contributions still like contribute.
Yes, but I mean, I suppose the question is, you asked, is there a chance that person would have made a contribution that outweighs the benefit we get from using them in our experiment, which obviously, again, ethical questions, there are separate.
I mean, there is a chance, but like, where is the balance there?
Well, I mean, the average person probably has a fairly neutral impact on the world. And so it can be assumed, thereby, that any given person is most likely to be average. And so I think that because someone could also have a negative impact, you'd have to weigh the probability of any level of impact on both sides, then multiply the impact with the probability, add it all together, and that is the expected outcome, right? So it's basically game theory, right? Where it's like, it's like playing roulette is not worth it because the odds of winning, right? If you put your money on black, then the odds of winning are, what is it, like 52 or whatever, like fields that they have they can land on. I don't know, and like, let's say it's like 52, and like when it's 0, when it's double 0, those are neither black nor red, so you end up having only like 25 that you can actually land on, and you double up, so if your chances of winning are 25 or 52, and your expected value of if you win is times 2, and otherwise it's times 0, then on average you end up with 26th of the money that you started with, and thereby it's a bad idea. And that's kind of the same sort of logic that we could apply here, where it's like, presumably most people are going to have a very neutral effect on the world, thereby that probably isn't much of a factor.
Sure.
I mean, if you have a counterpoint, you can feel free to present it. I just personally don't think it's...
I'm not sure if I have one, and if I did, I don't know how to phrase it. So I'm just not going to bother right now.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean,
maybe sometime in the future.
I do sometimes get frustrated, especially when it comes to like actual game theory stuff, where Like my parents are kind of bad with that as well. Where like sometimes it's like, oh yeah, you can win someone. And they're like, oh yeah, maybe we should try that. It's like, yeah, but like the cost of participating is actually not worth the chance of winning. And then they'll say something like, oh, but someone has to win. It's like, yeah, sure, but like the odds of you winning do not justify the entrance
really,
fee.
really low. Yeah,
it's like, but I think sometimes people, especially when it comes to these things that are like incredibly unlikely with like incredibly big benefits, like people like can't really fathom like the exact math that's going on. But I mean, at the end of the day, usually the answer is if like a lottery is worth running or something like that, then chances are it's not worth playing it.
that is true. That is why you do the math if the lottery is actually worth running.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, the house always wins.
And usually for long running ones, you don't really have to do the math. It's like for like really new lotteries that you might want to do it.
Yeah, I think the way that works out is actually that sometimes some of the traditional lotteries can, if the jackpot gets really high, technically be worth it because of just there can be a tipping point where like the odds of winning are actually like even as low as they are, technically slightly outweigh the benefit of like winning the jackpot. But there's also the problem that A, that happens very rarely, that it actually gets that high, and B, whenever jackpots get really high, more people play. And the problem is, your odds of winning the jackpot are not dependent on how many people are playing. But everyone else also has the same odds of winning the jackpot, and thereby, you could have to split it. Because the way jackpots tend to work is that, unlike like getting like 3 correct numbers on your 6 out of 49, the jackpot gets split between all winners. And so, actually, even if maybe it's mathematically worthwhile, there's still always a question of like, do you have to split it at the end? And then it might still not be.
Slightly off topic though.
Yes, although again, right, like game theory does somewhat relate to. You can apply game theory to a lot of things, right? Because it's always just about probability and expected value. And if you multiply all of the possibilities, you take every possibility, you multiply the outcomes with the probabilities. Obviously, you would have to have some numeric element to evaluate those. And then only if you end up with a higher number at the end than you started with, basically, then only is it worthwhile doing. And so that is something we could apply here as well, where it's like, oh, right, like this has the chance to cure like a very dangerous disease, right? Like, oh, like this experimentation is probably gonna kill, like, I'm gonna have to kill 10 people, but I might find the cure to cancer. It's like, well, right? Like, I mean, obviously a lot of people die of cancer, but like, what do you mean when you say it might cure cancer, right? And so, if it's like, oh yeah,
yes,
it's like one in
that's like
it's 1 in a trillion. And it's like it's probably not worthwhile. If it's 1 in a million, it might actually be worthwhile.
I've had a bit of time. So I've had like a second to think about like my counterpoint there. First of all, what you just mentioned, like what are the chances of the test to bring results, and how big is the impact of those results? And second is like, if we assume that like the people participating are really fully volunteer, then I think the sample of the people that participate is clearly biased towards people that have at least some sort of drive to contribute to science.
Yes, that is true. I mean, the counter argument is if someone's actually like volunteering with like fully informed consent, right? Like they know what the odds are of it succeeding and all of that stuff. Then at some point the question is like, if you give them the option to make the choice in the first place, then you can't really say that whatever choice they're making is wrong, right? For if they think it is worthwhile, then that is also just because you want to participate in science doesn't necessarily mean that you could participate on the research side yourself, right? Like, not everyone's mind is wired that way. Not everyone has the qualifications for it. I mean, obviously, on some level, formal qualifications are not the most important thing, but not everyone is that kind of person. So, but yeah, I can see how, obviously, like, selfish people are more likely to have a negative impact on the world, probably. And those would not participate in those experiments. So I can see where you're coming from. I don't think we're ever going to come up with like a 100% clear solution.
I don't think so, no.
And I don't want to suggest
I never thought we would.
And I don't want to suggest that we're flipping with human lives. I know, like, we talked about, like, sacrificing a couple people for, like, huge impact could be worthwhile, but I think the uncertainty and just the value we tend to place in human life and also autonomy, right? But it's like, if someone really wants to sacrifice their life for advancement, then I guess maybe they should be able to, but most people will probably not want to do that. So forcing someone to be sacrificed for the greater good is a very hard thing to stomach, and is probably also just not good for society. I mean, I talked about before about like how I would construe like a very basic morality system, and obviously autonomy, free will, like is definitely one of them, one of the pillars there. And the other thing also just is that if you kill people for progress, right, if that's like a thing that is on some level accepted, then I think that also has a negative impact on society. Because then people will have to ask themselves, right, like when it will be my turn to just be like carted off for like the better, like the greater good or whatever. And I think that has a negative impact on society that probably will also have a disadvantage to the society's overall development. So I think and that's admittedly just more like a guess and estimation, right? Like that's not necessarily something I have like hard data to back up, but I think there are a lot of reasons for why, obviously, this is not a good idea. There's a reason why we have medical ethics and stuff like that, and why we have very strict guidelines for experimentation with that sort of thing. Do you have anything else you really want to say, or do we want to move on to our facts of the week?
Not really, no.
Well, Let's go fact of the week?
To the facts of the week. So, staying on the topic of like big contributions, there recently has been a development in desalination techniques.
Oh, that's good.
That is turning salt water, like from the sea, into normal drinkable water.
I like drinkable water.
Yeah, drinkable water is really, really good. I like it. I can recommend. So, MIT researchers have... Okay, where do I even start? I have written down like what I want to say about the fact before the podcast started, and I'm now realizing that like my introduction is like garbage.
Okay, so you want to start with salt water and you want to end with desalinated water. Because not even that good of a joke.
Yeah, basically. Yes. Anyway, I'll start with the cost and size and production. So, like, they estimate that a device using this new technique of the size of like a small suitcase would be able to produce about 4 to 6 liters of drinkable water per hour, completely like just powered by the sun. No electricity required. Not only that, but it would need maintenance only every like few years while operating like completely passively.
That is fantastic.
Yes. Like currently, like before this, there were like 2 main methods of desalinating water.
I mean,
one of them is, yes, basically just boiling it and collecting the vapor and letting it cool off again. That's easy, but requires a lot of energy. Plus, you kind of have to somehow get rid of the salt afterwards.
Actually, salt is useful.
Yes, but like you still produce a lot of it, and like, yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the one country that I can think of that does a lot of desalination, I think, is Saudi Arabia, because they don't have a lot of groundwater and they're right by the sea. I think it was Saudi Arabia. And one thing that I was immediately thinking of with like what can you do with a shit ton of salt was salting the oil in winter. I don't think they have winter over there.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So another way is to just run the water through a filter.
Oh, yeah, that makes
just
sense.
filters out the salt.
Yeah, but you have to constantly replace the filters.
But yeah, constantly replace the filters, and the system gets clogged up pretty fast. And again, you kind of have to deal with the salt. Yeah, big issue. And this new technique kind of combines the best of both of these. It runs the water through tubes made of filters that are hydrophobic, so they don't let water through.
Okay.
What they do then is heat the water with the power of the sun and make it evaporate, meaning it can now go through the filter tubes and collect outside.
Okay.
Without the salt. But since it's tubes and there's like constantly flowing water, the salt doesn't get a chance to accumulate in there, so it gets washed away.
Yeah.
And just like that, it is able to function. Like, this is an oversimplification of another simplification of the method that I've read. So, like, it's probably not the full picture, but this is like the essence of how it works.
Yeah, my main thing is that I feel like it would still need just as much energy as basically boiling the water like the traditional way. I mean, yes, you don't have to deal with the waste salt, which is useful, but it doesn't seem like it really reduces the energy requirement all that much from what you told me.
I cannot really comment on that.
Fair enough.
It might be that since it's like lower volumes of water, that the solar energy is enough to boil those.
Well, yeah, but
and don't require like big infrastructures, like because like on big industrial levels, if you have like a big desalination plant, you require much more surface area to collect all the energy from the sun to like boil the water, right?
Yes, but I mean,
To
saying that it's a small amount of water is obviously like the volume is the point, right? Like obviously, when you talk about energy in this case, you're talking about like watt hours per liter or whatever. Like,
yeah,
that you would obviously talk about like energy per volume.
like in this case, it's like 4 to 6 liters of water per hour of like sunlight.
Yeah, you say that's
I don't know on like where in the world that would apply.
Yeah, that's a point.
Because obviously,
well,
like power of the sun differs depending on where you are in the world.
Yes, although a big part of why solar energy varies so much is also like just weather, and so I'm assuming they mean
that as well
during direct sunlight, and so I mean obviously yes, being closer to the sun would help, but only by like a small amount, given that like the distances on Earth are like fairly irrelevant. But
it's not about the distance; it's about the angle.
Yes, but
if you're at an angle to the sun, there's like less sun rays per area.
But doesn't the angle change over the time of day?
Yeah. That's what time of day is.
Yeah, so the question isn't where on Earth, but just like, did they do it during noon? And the answer is probably.
I mean, not quite. Like, even noon at like the equator and like the North Pole.
Oh, right.
It's like completely different angles.
The axial tilt of, yeah.
Yeah.
God damn it. Angles, three-dimensional space, and spheres. It gets very complicated.
Yeah, so I didn't get that information out of the summaries I've read on this. But still, like, even if it can only really be used like on the or near the equator, still is like a huge thing.
I mean, near the equator has the most conductive weather anyways, and also, again, right, like, I'm thinking about, like, the Middle East and, like, the Sahara region, although mostly coastal, of course, but, like, that is a little bit north of the equator, but not that much, right? Like, that is probably, like, and I think desalination techniques are actually one of those things where it's a good thing if science advances in that area, because we're kind of running out of groundwater, like, everywhere, and so, logically, that means that, rainwater collection and desalination are going to be very necessary technologies, and rainwater collection can only do so much. And so desalination, because the ocean is for our purposes, effectively endless source of water. Although I'm sure we can manage to dry that up too if we really put our minds to it. Humans are very good at, like, exhausting resources, but obviously desalination would be, like, a very important aspect that is probably going to become more important to the world in general, and so not having that be as energy intensive would be really good, because we already, well, there's the thing. I was going to say we always struggle with energy, but it's really just that we don't put up enough renewable energy is really the main thing there. But yeah, adding new high-intensity things is obviously not going to help that. My fact of the week is arguably also about scientific progress. But it's a very different science. It's archaeology. So my fact of the week is about the Upano Valley sites. They are a cluster of architectural sites in the Amazon rainforest within the Morona Santiago province in Ecuador. And apparently the first evidence of those sites was found in the 70s. But what's interesting is that in 2015, the government of Ecuador funded a LiDAR survey, and the results of that were published in Science in January 2024. I think it was like 2 weeks ago or something. So this is like
that's very recent.
A fairly recent fact of the week. And the known sites spread across 300 square kilometers. And they've discovered 15 settlements, 5 of which were described as large settlements. And there's also the typical construction pattern at the sites. No, wait, that's not even the. These structures, I believe, are believed to be primarily residential, though some are thought to have held ceremonial purposes, which is a tangent I'll go off later. But yeah, no, they were settled in 500 BC. Oh, that's right. That's why this is an important discovery. They were settled as early as 500 BC, which is about 1,000 years earlier than any other known large-scale settlements in the Amazon rainforest area. Right. So this is like important to like our understanding of how civilizations moved around there. And it was abandoned between 380 and 680. So they were actually abandoned around the time when other large-scale civilizations were actually first found in the area. So that is useful. And yeah, I think that's all that I really want to say about that, which I guess just brings us to my tangent about ceremonial purposes. I swear to God, archaeologists are just lazy, right? Like, or not willing to admit when they don't know something. Because every single time they find something that doesn't have like an obvious use, they'll always be, it's probably ceremonial. Like, I'm sure it might have been, but you're kind of just pulling it out of your ass, right? It's very hard to prove that something was ceremonial. You're just saying that because, and I think part of that is also just this thing that we view these past civilizations as somewhat different from ourselves, right? every now and again you'll find something where they're like, oh, this was a children's toy. It's like, okay, cool, that makes sense. But I feel like most of the time it's like, oh yeah, there were some figurines in a corner of a building somewhere. This must have been an altar. It's like, well, or it could have been, the place that the children were playing. I'm not saying it definitively was one or the other. I'm just saying that it turns out there are other possibilities of what this could have been about, right? Maybe this wasn't actually religious, maybe it was just decoration.
Yes.
Like, not every... I'm by no means an expert in the field, and maybe there's something that I'm missing here. But it does feel like archaeologists really like explaining everything that doesn't have a clear practical purpose as ceremonial, and I just think that maybe not all of it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was that rant. No, this is something that like kind of low-key annoys me, because it feels like they just... It's just like, oh, this is our go-to explanation. If we can't explain something, it's ceremonial. It's like... I know there are definitely cases where it was later found out that there could be another explanation. So this is definitely not something that is just always like too oblique to the public so that I wouldn't understand it. But like sometimes there is actually just like, it actually wasn't ceremonial sometimes. So I don't know. What is Square Last After Show?
Oh, my favorite.
Laser and tonic are two starting words. We found an N. It's interesting because oftentimes before we would have had we do have 4 letters in the first row, but oftentimes in the last couple times we oftentimes had 4 letters in the first row and column, and this time we really don't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wait, do we have? No, we don't have 4 letters in the first row.
Oh, sorry, that's 3. The E, the E does not go there.
Yeah.
That's
worse. That's a lot of white hints. Ah.
Huh, yeah, no, that is true. And unfortunately the T did have one orange one and the A had one yellow one, because that would have been a great one to be like, okay, bottom 3x3, there has to be an A, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, bottom 4x4 is 7L, but that's not very insightful. Let's see, which ones do we only have negative hints for? The C?
C.
Which has to be in either this 2x2 or these two, or that one. Which is why it's the same logic as this 3x3, but it's just very...
It doesn't feel as fancy.
It's a lot... I think it's just trickier to keep track of as well, right? It's the only one, right? The C. Because we have a positive R, we have positive I, we have positive E, S. Well, we hit an N, T and A. So yeah, L and C are the only ones that we only have negative hints of, and the L is in a corner, which is just objectively less useful.
Yeah.
The first row almost certainly needs some vowels, right? Words without vowels are tricky. And the first row cannot contain A or E. Now, we do have an O pointing at this place, so maybe there's an O there. But I was thinking before an N. I mean, it could be an S or something, right? It's not necessarily that, but I was thinking maybe we put a vowel here, just for testing purposes, like a U or an I.
Yeah, why not?
We could try something like untie. Maybe that's
I would actually like to not go with the N in second place, because that would bring us no new information.
Fair enough. But yeah, no, that's a very good point. And there's no point in solving this word right now. Even if we happened to get the right word for it, it wouldn't give us that much, because at the end of the day, we usually solve the grid more or less in one go. That's kind of how that goes. I definitely want to try U, because I think it's the only vowel that we haven't tried yet. Well, except Y, but... So I definitely want to try U somewhere. We could lead with an I and then have the U later, but let's see, what else would be nicer that we haven't tried yet? P, G, M, B. Uh, huh.
Is it just me, or are there just like not that many words in the English language that start with an U and don't follow up with an N?
I was gonna say there's a lot of uns, definitely. I mean, ugly came to mind, but that's
Yeah.
4 letters, and uglier is 6. I'm always a little
Yeah.
annoyed by. Yeah, no, wait. That is 6, right?
Like most words I try to come up with just like end up German.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I don't have that problem all that much. Like, most of the time, I don't come up with German words. That doesn't really happen that much. My brain
Usually
is,
I don't either, but like in this case, somehow that just like
like, sometimes when we're, like, missing, like, a
brings
letter.
forth lots of German
Like,
words.
sometimes when we're missing, like, a letter or two, I have that, but, like, usually my brain is actually, like, very separated by language. Which is, I think, part of what makes it difficult for me to translate sometimes, but that's not really the point.
Yeah.
Ukulele. It's way too long. I don't know. Uber. Are we far enough that Uber would be a word, like Ubers, maybe as a plural?
Right, I guess. Actually,
I don't even like this as an answer. Yeah, no,
I mean,
literally.
it would test like a lot of things.
Well, yes, I guess. Yeah, I mean,
Like those are pretty common letters.
yes, but also, like, we already have some hints on ENR. I mean, I guess we don't have to have all of the letters being unique, but U N I Q U E, it's too long and it has an N. I mean, it doesn't, again, right? It could start with an I and then have U somewhere later on. That would also perfectly serve my purposes.
Yeah.
Like, I was gonna say igloo, but that's double O in English, I believe. Like immolate, that's too long. Immolate, not immolate. Fuck, that's it's too long and it's not even right. That makes it even worse. What?
A thumb.
Thumb.
This thing. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of wanted to lead with a vowel just because of the N. Well, with a vowel or, well, there can't be an S there, so a vowel would have been a good place to start. I mean, it does test for the U, which is what I said I wanted to do, but that's why I kind of said I would have liked to lead it with an I or a U or maybe an O. I mean, M and B are nice to test. T. I mean, there needs to be a T in the first row, but it's not going to be there. It's not going to be TN, right? That's the problem. So that technically is useless because it's not going to be in the first column, and in the first row,
Imbue.
it's not going to be in that spot, right? What did you say? Imbue.
Imbue.
IMBUE. IMBUE. That works. See, that's the kind of guess that I wanted. Yeah, no, I mean, it tests I and U. It tests M and B, which we haven't tried before, and it tests E, which we already have a hint that suggests there's one elsewhere, but you could never have enough E's. No M's or B's. But it's good to know. Also, the first row has no I, A, or E. I mean, it feels like there is a U there. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it could also be there.
Kinda does.
But it could also be an O. But there aren't that many consonants you can put before N. And S is the obvious one, which is not allowed there. P works in like a handful of very specific situations, right? Like pneumatic. But like very unlikely. So U or O up there. I like U if we have to have one in the column anyways. I guess we could try and see if the E's intersect here. By putting an E in third, although that is a little awkward because obviously the row that we're guessing cannot have an E. So that would be exclusively guessing for the column. What do we want to get out of our next guess, I guess is the question, because I don't think we can do much with what we have so far. Are there any letters we're looking for? Any specific theories we want to test? Because again, right, like we could test if the E is there just because the hints intersect there, but at the same time, there can't be an E there, so...
If we put the E in the second position, we can definitely know all the spots an E can go, or must go.
Oh, because we already have it in every row and column except for second.
Yeah. Then we will know for a fact if it's like one or multiple E's.
That's an interesting approach. Exactly I don't think we've ever had that specific thing where we like just figured out one of each. I guess let's do that. It's not like we have something better to do. Maybe bring in some of the consonants that we haven't tried yet, like a G, P, D. Definitely not U. Okay. Like something like demise. That's 6 letters. Forget about that. But something like that, where like D, E. We can't have M's. Okay, so there were a couple of faults with that, but pedos. I don't know. Tepid. I mean,
not a bit.
No, the I is bad.
The I there.
Yeah, I was gonna say it can't be in the column, but at least it can be in the row. But it literally can't be in that spot though, so it's not at all useful.
Like, if possible, I would like to include an A somewhere later on in the word to test out where the A goes in the second row.
Okay, so later on just means not the first two.
Yeah.
T's. Okay, that even the last one is terrible. But teats. Is it double E or is it EA? Tears. However you want to put that. But tears and tears are spelled the exact same, right? Yeah. It's that thing where like tear and tear are two very different words that are both nouns that are pronounced differently but are spelled the same. But then sweet and sweat are spelled differently. So that's anyway. So tears would technically, well, would try T, which.
How about fears? Feats. Feats is, I think, better.
So what did you say?
Feats, as in Feats.
Oh, feats. For some reason I understood Pete's, which is like, I was like, who? Feats, like that.
Because that doesn't test the T for like the column where we know for a fact it cannot be. And it still covers the first row.
Okay, yeah, no, sure, this works. We haven't tried F yet. We don't know much about S except that it cannot go in the central row and first column. Yeah, that. We don't have any information about T in that area. Yeah. Well, we got an F. Okay, and we get some more information about E's. So we want E's in the second and fourth column and in the second and third row.
Okay, shit, I did not account for that.
So
we know at least two
there.
E's.
Well, it's one of these.
No. This, like, the upper one.
Well, this one has to be an E because this row needs one, and wait, it has to be because the row needs one, and that's the only place in the row that we can legally put one.
Yes.
Then this row
same
needs
hint
one.
Also gives us
this column needs one, which then definitively has to be this one.
To be here, yes. We just don't know if the other one, like
this one
to left of that,
could
is
be,
an E or not.
This one could be an E, but doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay, I did not account for that.
Hey, we got two definitive E's. That's more than we usually get out of a single word guess. So, like, that's still pretty good. We also still need an A and an S in that. Okay, wait. Okay, A can go most likely before or after the E. Although after belief is more common, just as a general matter. S could then... Well, S has to be in the first two. So it's likely there, because that one actually needs an S, the row. S can't be here because of this one, and obviously the E's already there, but it wouldn't be able to go there anyways. The A needs to be either here or there. And again, right, English language, generally the E goes first.
Yeah.
So it could be something like steer.
But that literally would can't also necessitate that the... Yeah. I'm just saying that, like, if we don't put the A in the second spot there, it has to go in the last spot on the second row.
Yes, that's a good point. And that row has all the letters that it needs, unfortunately. The column we just looked at also now has all of them. The last column needs an R and an E. Oh, no, it doesn't need. No, that's fuck. I get my hints turned around today a lot. The second to last row needs an I still, which can go in both places, but seems more likely there. Based on just intersecting hints. What do we have on D's? Oh, we didn't try D's yet. Because undid would also be an option for the central column, unfortunately. Let's see, the first row still needs a T and an R. The R cannot be in first, but because the U and the S are still guesses, the R doesn't have to be there, but it would have to be with our guesses. And then the T would have to be in first, which it can't be, or in last, which, again, based off of our guesses, this is the only spot that it can then still go. Otherwise, it could technically be in the center, but TN is questionable. Which gives us... I was going to say trust, but obviously not.
Right.
Rust, Zrust, Prust, Drust, Drust, Crust with a C. Brust, Rust, Rust, Crust, blah, 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 blah. I think it's the only one that works, although sometimes I do overlook possibilities.
And we do, in fact, need a C somewhere.
Hey, when you see somewhere, we just don't know where. Do we have any positive... No, C is the one that we didn't have any positive hints on, so yeah. I did at one point say spear for this one, but that would put a P right there, which then brings up the question of what... Oh god, what comes after a C? I mean, I guess it could be H, R... or a vowel. Because obviously whatever goes there then also has to work for this row.
If it's a vowel, then it can only be a U in that spot, right?
It can't be I, A, E, or O, so yes. But it could be a Y. Y at the beginning of the word, not that common, but it is possible. I mean, CY is definitely something that does exist, right? Like,
yeah, like cyst.
Yeah, exactly. Anything Cyto as a prefix as well. So yeah, that would work. CU would also work totally, but UE as a start of a word sounds odd to me. That doesn't necessarily mean it's impossible, but UN, that doesn't really sound English to me. Which leaves us with Y, R, or H. What's the possibility that I was wrong about the A? Because we could, I think we've had it before, right? Renal, as in pertaining to the, I was going to say liver, not the other one. Kidney. But then we would have this one having its A in front of the E, and then either it has AEA, which seems very unlikely, or this one has to put its A somewhere else, which I guess before the I would work. Except it's not loud, so it would have to mean last. So one of those two rows, row 2 and 4, has to end in A.
Yeah.
And Renpa, Henpa, and Yenpa don't really make sense, so this is probably not a P unless I'm overlooking something. Smear. Yenma, Henma, Renma. Also no M's, so never mind. Swear. Henwa, Renwa, Yenwa.
Also, no, it cannot start with an R.
It's not allowed to start with an
Either.
R, right? So
Anyway,
it basically, based on the C here, if correct, would have to basically be an H or Y, right? And we already said we don't necessarily love words, or have I said that? I don't necessarily love word starting with Y, which almost makes it an H, right? Which, if that is an H, then the question is, like, what the fuck is this word, right? Hen, wa, hen, ra, hen, ta, hen, za, hen, pa, hen, za, hen, da, hen, fa, hen, ga, hen, ha, hen, ja, hen, ka, hen, la, hen, ya, hen, xa, hen, ka, hen, hen, va, henna. I don't love any of that. But yeah, it can't be R, so renal will be out even if. Okay, let's see. What did I say? Rust, trust. Trust is not allowed. Thrust, prust, thrust, drust, thrust, grust, crust, trust, crust, rust, erust, thrust, crust, rust, rust, erust, arust. Well, those aren't allowed. Orust, urust, orust, eurust. It basically would have to be crust, right? This is weird. It feels like we made well, it feels like most of likely I made a mistake somewhere. Because this doesn't seem quite right. The problem is if I took a step back and tried again, I probably would come up with pretty much the same situation. Are there any other positive hints that we haven't used yet? Well, there's the U hint. Which would suggest that TAU. How do you feel about that? Like in taught. I mean, it does exist.
Oh. Yeah.
But Taurus. As in bull. Other question would be, how do we feel about CHUF? Or CYUF, that's actually worse. REU is technically, I suppose, possible, but I don't love that. And UNUI would be... I suppose I could go there. But then this one, if it was UNU, then it would have to end in I. That would be almost just as bad. Because the third row definitely needs a U somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, this column also needs a T, which we haven't used it, and an O. T can't go there. Could go both of those places logically. Oh, fuck, this intersection, so we only have one O hint. Rio. Well, for Yao is not going to be it. Ending in O, possible, I suppose? Okay, that works. No, because my first thought was REO could maybe sort of work, but then REO something T, I didn't click for me, and then I entered those, and then retro came to mind. So we've used those. We used EEAS. Yep. R. I haven't used the R here yet. Can't go in last. Well, I mean, it's probably Friar, right? So that makes sense. Is it gonna be?
What is a friar?
It's like a type of monk. I think he's like, he might be like the head of the monastery or something. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I did just mention, right, like bull stuff. I don't know how that would end, but it almost sounds like it should be that, right? Like Tor, Ro, Tor, Ra, Tor, Ru, Tor, Re. Doesn't really make sense, does it? But EU as an ending makes perfect sense.
It does.
Although it's usually UE, isn't it? Right? Like blue, true, glue. Maybe it's not actually that good. You knew why. Jesus. You knew why. Okay, there is obviously always the option that this U is actually incorrect up here. Trouble is, there isn't much else that could go up there. I guess O can also go up there, right? And then, but like, that looks worse, doesn't it? So I guess that puts the U there and one there, which makes this crust. AUTCSRSAUEI. I mean, the grid as we have filled it out, I believe, fills all of our requirements. I'm just trying to come up with words that would go with that. L. No, never mind. I was thinking of other letters that can go with C, but I think L would work, but it's not a lot, so Utter? Utter? And then tarot, I guess? I feel like I'm starting to hate more and more what I'm doing here, but... Well, it can't be untie. It would have to be untitu, untier, untit, untiz, untip. Untip? To untip. I mean, if ever there was a comment on American tipping culture, right? Untiz, untid, untif, untig, untic, until. Now, actually, we do need an L somewhere, don't we?
Right, yeah. Now that you mention it.
I always hate it whenever there seems to be something wrong in the grid, but more and more stuff starts falling into place, which makes the wrong stuff just set up more, and it also it almost feels like you're backing yourself into a corner where you're rolling towards something not working. Oh god! Also, we have the situation where we are missing theoretically, if every guess is correct, which they rarely are all correct, we're missing exactly 4 letters, but they are in this 2x2 pattern. Where if a word is missing 1 letter, I can probably figure it out. 2, tricky.
Yeah.
Again, right? I feel like H would make sense here, but then what is it? Chuffed.
You put the wrong letter there.
Oh yeah, that is. Chuffed, chuff.
Think so. Just chuff, double F. I don't know what it means, but it seems the most English to me.
It sounds like it would be something, yeah. I mean, I know chaff, but I don't know chuff. Chuffk, chuffj, chuffk, chuffle, chuffy, chuffks. Yeah. Which sounds like it would make that folio, but that seems dubious, right?
It can't be. No
okay,
I's in that column.
I mean, I was not... I never liked E-A-I to begin with, but... So, what did I say? Fulvo, Fulto, Fulzo, Fulpo, Fulzo, Fuldo, Fulfo, Fulgo, Fulho, Fulco, Fulvo.
Like tarry with a Y, a word.
What did I say? Folly.
Yeah.
Steal? It can't be a T. It's not allowed. Squeal? No, that would require you. Spiel? No, that's spelled differently. Steal, sfeel, squeal, shield, skeel, seal, seal, sveal, sneal. I'll go with sneal.
This is almost definitely not correct. But I don't know how to improve this.
Okay, I feel
At least not with the stuff we have.
I feel like the question we now have is rows or columns, and I guess the answer is rows, isn't it? Because then our second guess is going to be chuff, and we're going to see if everything falls apart. Our first guess is Terry, which I'm less confident in being a word than folly. I'm going to go with rows.
Sure.
Those are columns. I'm gonna go with columns. Terry is correct.
Hey!
Which now brings up the very dubious question of, is chuff correct? I feel like we need to do some Googling after this. Retro, I don't have a problem with. Until I also don't have a problem with. I just spell it correctly, that's cool. And sneal, I don't know what that means. It's also not a word. Okay, Okay, so we now know for a fact that the A has to be there. Because of this A hint.
Yes, the S
and
also
the S
needs
also
to be there.
has to be there. So the only ones that can be wrong are the N and the L. I'm in some sense more confident in the L. At the same time, I don't know what the letter up here would be. Also, the whole thing we just didn't give us any more useful hints. I mean, it's not surprising, because obviously the green hints are never useful, and that limits us to have as many hints to begin with, but... I am gonna assume the L is correct, and I think I'm just gonna get some letters that sound vaguely plausible, maybe?
Yeah. Actually, wait, no. I was about to suggest maybe try the row instead, but we first of all can't try the row.
Yeah, we can't try the row. Even if we would be the same result.
Yeah.
Okay. Shield is a word, and both letters are wrong. Which I guess makes sense, because then maybe at least I actually know the word in the column, right? Okay,
so folky.
Yeah, folky came to mind. I mean, normally people would say folksy with an extra S in between, but it doesn't necessarily mean that folky is not a word. Folsy... I mean, folky would be the kind of obvious one, and then it cannot be steak is the other thing, right? It also can't be. Wait, can it be sneak? No, we tried N, right?
Could be sneak.
No, we didn't try N. Could be sneak.
But we don't. We don't know if it was the N that was wrong with sneal.
Well, sneal wasn't a word.
Well, yeah.
That's why.
But we don't know if it was the N or the L that was wrong with it.
It's just not a word. It's not that it wasn't the solution, it's not a word. Right? So the L is obviously wrong, we know that for a fact, because there can't be an L here. We just figured that out.
Okay, so do we want to try sneak?
Yeah, I mean, I want to try sneak. It is sneak. Okay.
Googling time.
This is one of those that I find frustrating, obviously, because I don't know all the words, making it very hard to guess, right? I don't know henna. I don't know. I don't definitively know folky. I don't know chuff. And yeah, the rest is fine. But well, Terry, I actually don't know either. But I think Terry,
a tree or a shrub of the Middle East having fragrant white or reddish flowers.
That is chuff?
No, henna.
Henna, okay, sorry. So yeah, Terry is to delay or to stay. And chuff?
What was to delay or to stay?
Terry.
Terry, okay.
Chuff is to produce or move with noisy puffing or explosive sounds. It can also, as a noun, be a noisy puffing or explosive sound, such as one made by a locomotive. Or it can also be a rude, insensitive person.
Oh, right.
But yeah, no, I guess chugga chugga chugga. Right, and I just wanted to double check folky, but it probably just means folksy. Having a character of folk music, yeah. It's just... I guess folksy is much more specifically about people, usually, but... Or like, it's just more like... In like a rural sense, right? In like a rural, southern, maybe kind of sense. And folky is specifically the music. Having technically 4 words in the grid that I didn't know is a little difficult on the solving front. I mean, you have to assume, right? This is a 10-word grid. That means 40% of the words in here we did not know. I mean, you said Terry, which sounded about right, but I mean, I don't think you knew what I meant.
That.
Or that it is definitively a word.
It sounded English enough to me. Same
Sure
with
enough.
Chuff.
Yeah. That brings us to
I mostly suggested Terry because of Foley.
Which
Because
was wrong!
would have... Yeah!
Which I guess is just another example of the folly of man. But, anyways, we're doing... nope, we're not doing that. I'm gonna have to mute that later on.
What was that?
That was just a random YouTube video I was watching, and I didn't press this button for scene switching, but the button for play pause, which are right next to each other.
Oh.
The point being, this is Earth Reviews. Neil.fun for those that are curious. And we're once again looking at reviews of things and giving them some ratings. Anything that jumps out at you? I know there are literally 4 options that you can't see that I can, but... Actually, not quite, sort of. It doesn't matter. They're not that interesting.
About roller coasters.
Roller coasters. 4.1. Loading. Your mom says, as long as I don't go too high, but I do like the feeling it gives me. Quandale Dingle says, increased my character's fun and their fun limit, but made my character vomit and made their fear go off the charts. If the fear spike is a glitch, please fix it. Otherwise, good activity 4 to 5. Leo says, awesome, except they're only available around the time I tend to get a heat debuff, which is almost always applied during the loading screen, and if I interact with the heat debuff, I get a headache or blah blah. Baz says, the people making the model for these things need to remake them. One of them had no seatbelt. Please fix this. Okay, that...
Oh.
I mean, I suppose...
That sounds dangerous.
I suppose as long as it doesn't go upside down, it's probably not that much of a danger. Like, upside down, steeply up or down, or too fast. It wouldn't be much of a roller coaster.
Which is like things roller coasters tend to do.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's more like a theme park ride, like one of those where you go through a tunnel and there's like some figurines in there, like a scary tunnel kind of thing or something like that. Yeah. I don't like
I personally am not. Yeah, me neither. So we are in agreement with this. But I do get that people like them in general.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, like 2 or 3 stars, just because I guess other people get something out of them.
Yeah, like I don't like they're nothing for me, but it's not like I don't like that other people like them.
2, 3, how do you feel about it?
I think 3 is appropriate.
Why? What is with this website? First of all, I don't think this was a thing before, and second of all, not only does it go to the right, but there... Oh, right, I think there was a comment that went... Yeah, there was a comment that went over the... Automatic character wrapping would be a good thing, right? Like, if there's no space, you might have to just wrap in the middle of a word. Because this ain't it, Chief. Especially because apparently the background also is just as wide as the website. Which makes it worse.
But I can tell you right now with my experience of CSS, this is not that trivial a thing to fix. At least not with my knowledge.
Yeah, I also once had to write a program that had to do some text wrapping, and I'm pretty sure I didn't have any handling for this exact situation either. Just because I made the very reasonable assumption that no one was going to abuse that. Now, that one was not for a website with public comments, but for like software that was supposed to be used internally for like things that like there was no reason for my wrapping solution not to work because it would have only broken if the word was actually longer than the line. The lines were a bit wider than they were here, and there's no reason to actually have a word that's that long in there. But still, that for general purpose use, that's a big question.
But have you like considered the fact that you wrote it for German speakers?
Yes, but again, right, like that was more something that would end up in a PDF file. Actually, I think it was in a table, so it wouldn't be a full A4 width, but still, it was quite
okay.
It was quite long. It's probably wide enough that it would have been like 3/4 of a line in like a paperback novel kind of dealio. So I don't think there would have been much reason for that to be a problem. And
like looking at
it did go back and wrap at like. Also, technically, there was a lot of dubious thing about what I wrote there. I mean, it's not really the point right now, but like we might as well talk about it. So I think it had like a certain character limit, and then if the string had more characters than that, it would just go to the previous space before it hit that character number and just chuck it in a new line. And there's two problems, right? Number one is that obviously if there's no space within that amount of characters, it breaks. Number two, that font does not have unispace characters, and the number of characters was more or less a guess. So yeah.
So when I had a similar issue once, I solved it by creating a virtual element of the same size as the real one and just filling that one character by character until the length of the text was over the bounding box of what it was allowed to be.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked.
Then it would try to get like the previous space from that position, and if it couldn't, it would just hard break at that position and add like a minus.
Mine wasn't for a website, so it was for a PDF document. So you enter it into like a basic UI, and then you get out a PDF document. And so, trouble with that is, at least the library I guess that I used, I don't think it had any like line break handling automatic stuff, and since I was actually like drawing the table by just giving it like lines to draw, it didn't have like a built-in table function. So the table is just some text that starts at specific widths into the page and some lines. And it just all happens to align fairly well because that's how I designed it, right? But so so the thing that would have happened if you had put like a text with like all capital O's or whatever, like whatever the widest letters that you could think of, it might have overrun a little and gone past the line because there's still a little bit of there's a proper term for that, of white space at the end. I swear there's a word for it. In a letter,
margin.
Margin, I think is the word I was looking for. So there's a little bit of margin, which it could have technically written on. There's nothing on the technical side preventing that. So it would have probably just overrun. It would have looked shitty, but it would have worked. And since there was a program we developed for a university course that is technically based on something that a company could have used, like there was a real company that had a real use case, But they were most likely never going to use any of our programs anyways. And even if they had used it, would have only been for internal use. So it wouldn't have been a big deal if the formatting didn't look great.
Okay, so question. Does your program handle Unicode?
I don't actually know the specifics of... Oh, I don't know about the character encoding. That's an interesting question. Because... So, the GUI gets text input in a basic text field, and that gets turned into a string, and that gets then printed into the PDF. I never did any specific character handling, so I don't know actually how a Java string handles that.
Okay. Because all I want to say is that Unicode has some very, very wide characters.
I mean, again, realistically, they were just going to type German text into it.
Yeah.
And since it was not meant for broad public distribution, I figured that the people that were using it weren't going to intentionally try to break it. And so the only things that really foolproofed against were things that I think could have reasonably occurred. Rather than...
But also, like, even just, like, without going, like, full crazy on Unicode characters, there's still, like, emojis that are generally quite a bit wider than normal characters. And people, for whatever reason, sometimes do put them in, like, places where they don't belong. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Whatever. I mean, again, the primary purpose of that program was just to, like, be able to demonstrate it to a professor, and anything after that was most likely just it gets thrown away. So it was never... Like, unless the professor had tried to break it, which, fair enough, but, like, it does work. I mean, he could have probably been, like, tried to break it and then be like, okay, you get another week to fix the errors or whatever, but I could have thought about it then. Well, we said we were going to do Earth review, so let's, like, review at least, like, 3 things. So, 2 more, that is to say.
So one thing that stands out to me...
There are 2 fires.
Is that, like... Yeah, fair. That is something... That's the first thing I noticed. Second, why are fingernails so low rated?
That's a good question.
Then, third, why is canned food so low rated?
That's an equally good question. I honestly haven't really much looked at the individual ratings, but there's a point there. Campfires are rated higher than fire, which does bring up some consistency questions, but I mean, I suppose just because fire is necessary for campfires doesn't mean that campfires can't be a better version of fire. But anyways, I guess canned food is our next one then, because as much as fingernails are useful, I do have questions about canned food.
Food stored in cylinders.
SCY says, the only canned food in my preference is Spam. So, clearly a bread. And it's really good, especially for breakfast. I don't know why Americans dislike Spam so much. It's good. See? I told you, right? Brits! Spam! Right? Like, it's just... I think Aussies might eat it too,
it's
but
good,
like...
though.
Is it, though?
Yeah.
The Weeb with Beans obviously has a very good rating for cat food, especially like the bean variant of this item. Yeah, I see. And I would hope to see a bug that lets you receive an infinite amount, and I believe it's either called Amazon or shoplifting. Okay. Sylphane says, doesn't increase enjoyment meter as much as other foods, but that's a small price to pay for how it lasts practically forever. Good to keep it in the bunker for the next world-ending event, or for when you get lost in an especially confusing dungeon. Fairly cheap as well. I don't think canned food is necessarily worse than other food. It depends entirely on both what is in the can and what the other food is. Like, I feel like
and also, like, how you plan on consuming the food and when.
Yeah, and how you... I mean, like, the canned chili con carne, for example. I don't think I've had a better chili. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to make a better chili, but, like, it probably is, but chili has like a fairly low bar. Like it's fairly easy to make like a decent chili, right? And so, yeah. The canned one is perfectly fine. I feel like most canned food I've eaten has been pretty good. I actually have much more problems with like the stuff that's wrapped in plastic. Like the ready-made meals that are like in like a plastic tray with like a plastic covering on it. You're supposed to like stab the plastic with a fork and then heat it in the plastic, and everything ends up tasting like plastic. So if you take it out of the plastic and put it on an actual proper plate, it's not as bad, but it still tends to be worse than like. But like canned food, I've never had problems with.
Yeah, canned food is good. Like I generally just like get like cheese and corn.
Oh yeah.
In like canned variants. Like I don't consume them often, but like whenever I do, like I add it as like a side thing to my dish, to the food I prepare.
Yeah,
and like I just buy them in like small cans.
Yeah, exactly.
They're enough for like 2 or 3 like servings, like food prep.
Yeah, that's kind of how
sessions.
Yeah, I think like a small can of corn is probably like enough for me to like if I like stir up some eggs or something, then I like might throw it in there, and it's usually enough for 2 meals. Yeah. I guess 5 stars. I don't really see a downside to canned food.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't can everything, but definitely. Like that's a small thing. Let's do one more then. Ooh, I do see books.
I'm just unsure if we've talked about them before as part of Earth Reviews.
I'm not entirely certain. I just would like to note that I think every single books are the single highest rated thing among what is currently shown to us.
How can you actually tell?
There are stars there, and it probably doesn't come through on like the Discord screen with like the quality, the bitrate probably isn't high enough, but you can actually see slivers. So like this is like 4 and a very tiny bit, and this is 4 and a slightly bigger tiny bit. This seems to be almost exactly 4. Branch is also almost exactly 4. Bears are pretty much exactly 4. It's basically It's basically like a progress bar that just happens to be shaped as stars.
Yeah.
And so the small difference between drive-thrus and books is probably not very easy to tell on your pixelated connection, but it's very clear for me.
Okay, just
we're doing books.
Let's go with books.
We did rate books 5 stars. Never mind then. We'll do another one. We did definitely also rate spreadsheets 5 stars, which are still below 3.
Yes. I don't understand why.
Chocolate rates higher than books, which I personally don't agree with, but I guess it's fine. Well, okay, so the thing is, on a 5-star rating scale, I could see rating chocolate 5 stars, right? Which is what we rated books. So I can see how that happens. Okay, we did spreadsheets. Any other preferences on here?
Did we do bicycles before? I feel like we might have.
Yep, 5 stars.
We definitely did. Okay. Yeah.
I love how every time the selection changes a little bit.
Aww.
I mean, toothpaste is definitely rated higher than dentists, which, you know. I mean, I will say toothpaste is probably helpful at not meeting dentists, but it's just because they were right next to each other, well, in the grand scheme of things, because they were on the same list, that stood out.
I cannot quite tell. Maybe you can help me. Are dentists or billboards lower rated?
I want to say dentists are slightly lower, but that That might be like a single pixel difference if there is one. In terms of width. That one's actually hard to tell.
Yeah.
The other ones were easier to tell because they were like the mailboxes where like the next stars barely filled out.
Mm-hmm.
And for books it was slightly more, so that was easy to tell, but like since those are they both seem to be like the indent where the star that's mirrored.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, you know what? I kind of want to read what people have to say about babies. Let's do that. Tiny humans that are still loading.
Babies.
Speaking of...
Yeah.
Loading. Without them, our species will be extinct. 4 stars. JP says, I honestly think the devs should make their audio quieter. I also feel like there should be some other way to silence them because the pinkies are unfortunately buggy and pop out at random times. Anonymous says, blobs of happiness make happiness higher, not very, very good. A mini-me. Babies are bad. Says, babies should not have been added to the game. They cry all night, so my avatar can't regenerate health, and they are pain to clean. Remove ASAP. 1 star. I'm assuming this person made an account specifically for this. So this is interesting, right? Because it's like Jacqueline 4 stars, Ladybug 3 stars, Disgusting 1 star, Violet Beauregard 2 stars, right? It's like it's like the entire spectrum. Jacqueline, they're adorable, and best thing is when they are brought to parties. Instead of awkward small talk, everyone just crowds around the baby and talks about it. Which, sometimes. Ladybug says, cute when they're quiet, sweet, and you don't know them, but they are poop machines, and that makes you wonder why your parents didn't stop after you. I mean, as an only child. Disgusting says, pink things that run around stenching the house with a rancid smell, and don't forget crying. I want to punch those disgusting putrid goblins. I've got good news for you. They also come in other colors. Violet Beauregard says, can get annoying as a child and you grow up to be a spoiled brat. I say we're better off being born with the intellect of the 6-year-old or so. So, babies. I don't like babies, but I once was one, which makes it a bit more difficult, I feel.
Yeah.
Also, the whole babies at parties thing doesn't always work. Sometimes they just make a lot of noise.
No. Mm-hmm. I feel like the rating of like just about 3 is justified.
See, I was thinking about giving them 2 stars, but
it's hinging on the fact that we kind of do need babies to like survive as a species.
I was gonna say, we don't need babies anymore. Like, I'm fine where I'm at, and I don't care if humanity dies out. Okay, fair enough. Okay, we'll give them 3 stars. They're a necessary evil. Emphasis on evil. No,
I think you can say that.
Which brings us to our final segment, the songs of the week. Sergej, what's yours? Song of the week.
I forgot. 1 second. Okay, it's Chemical Love by Kevin and Cherry.
I don't like it.
Does not surprise me at all.
Anything else you have to say about this?
I mean, I've been kind of listening to just like various Eurobeat songs as like background music when I program recently. The last couple days, and this is like one of them that kind of stands out to me.
Okay.
That's about it.
Well, my song of the week is "Knocking on Heaven's Door" by Bob Dylan.
It's getting dark, too dark to see. I feel I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door.
Okay, so two things about this one, of course. Number one, famously covered by Guns N' Roses, I slightly prefer the original. Number two, this is a bit more of a meta thing, but I looked it up when I had last used this, right? Because I had used it before, but I was feeling like doing a Bob Dylan song, and I think this is the one out of like my top 3 Bob Dylan songs that I haven't used the longest, right? So I used it, and this is basically pure coincidence because I'd already decided on this, but I used this 111 episodes ago. So this is now 344, and I used it last on 233. Which I just thought was an interesting tidbit, so I'm mentioning it now.
It is.
That's all I have to say. I don't know. Opinions, thoughts, do you like it, do you not like it?
I do like it, yeah.
Okay, good. Which brings this episode of the Trash Talk Podcast to a close. If you liked what you saw, give a like to the video. If you want to see more of us like this, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you have something to say, leave a comment or join us on our link in the description below. Sergej?
That's it.
That's it.